We live in the greatest era. Smack dab in the middle of the age of technology, we created invention after invention, and we perfected it. We live in an era where humanity has already been to the moon, worldwide wars have already been fought, and nuclear weapons have been dismantled for the better. This is an era of information. One where communication technologies have become so streamlined, well, they're simply a part of everyday life now. With the availability to constantly stay informed becoming a reality, well, we've developed a need for it. Hell, I can't imagine a life without my phone and internet access. But too often we don't stop to consider the time and effort put in to make such a powerful piece of equipment. The arduous road from carrier pigeon to morning news television. My compatriots, my name is Enzo Louis Durso, and I'm here to talk to you about the history of long-distance communication and the origins of broadcast television. Communication has always been an essential part of human life, and as our ancestors began to spread across the globe, a need began to rise for a longer distance form of communication. The earliest form of this were smoke signals used by North American tribes as well as China. These signals were used to warn comrades of impending danger, and in this way, they could transmit signals as far as 750 kilometers within a few hours. In fact, this method is still used today by Vatican City to indicate the selection of a new pope. The next form is probably one of the most delightful in my opinion, pigeons. Due to their natural homing ability, pigeons were used extensively for long-distance communication. They were used by the Persians, Romans, Greeks, and many others. Some were even called heroes for their deeds during war. A homing pigeon named Cher Ami was awarded the French War Cross for her services in World War I. Pigeons were used till around the middle of the 19th century when they were mostly replaced by horseback courier services. Now this is where things get really crazy. The late 19th century was the birthplace of a number of inventions, including electric telegraphy, the radio, and telephones, but the benefits of the telephone weren't really exploited until the 20th century. So let's just start out with the telegraphy, because that brought a new form of long-distance communication, Morse code. In fact, Morse code is still used globally as a mode of communication. And up till a few decades ago, telegraphy was the most popular form of long-distance communication. It wasn't until 2006 that the telegraph powerhouse fell after the US discontinued it due to a pressure to be replaced by a greater invention, being radio. The first broadcasting of a radio transmission happened in 1895 and consisted simply of Morse code. Afterwards, music and talking was introduced experimentally around 1905. But the development of radio expanded violently from this point on, as it played an important role in military communication during World War I. After the war, radio broadcasting was made commercial in around the 20s, and nearly the entire planet had a broadcasting system by the 50s, but those were primarily operated or regulated by the government. One of the most significant changes happened around the 1960s with the introduction of a small and affordable portable radio. This greatly expanded access to radios around the world, and today, most countries have evolved into a dual system of state-sponsored or commercially made content. Alongside the medium of radio, television was also being developed. Before the world was introduced to digital television, their mode of entertainment was with a simpler TV set that just displayed moving images. The idea started back in the 1880s when an inventor created simplistic moving pictures through a filtered light, viewed through a spinning disc. And in the 20s, scientists began experimenting on developing still images through the use of radio waves. Television became available in a crude experimental form in the 1920s, but it would still be several years until it would be available to regular consumers. After World War II, an improved form of black and white television became popular in the United Kingdom and United States, and television sets became commonplace in homes, businesses, and institutions. By 1954, the first color broadcast was made. And by the 1960s, television became commonplace in most households. By then it was known as the dominant force with their 24-hour programming, their shows, and mass advertising. By 1980, satellite television shrunk the world by making live feeds possible, and the new millennium brought digital television. Finally, that just leaves the smartphone. The first invention dates back to the 1970s, but it wasn't until 1992 when IBM made a prototype model that contained the first personal digital assistant feature. It was the year 1994 that saw the actual first smartphone that could send faxes, receive calls, emails, and various other doohickeys. As time went on, other companies began to develop the PDA features such as BlackBerry OS, Palm OS, and Nokia. By the early 2000s, technological advancements had led us to an even more refined version of the smartphone, the first iPhone. My family member, as we've both heard, communication technologies between humans has existed for centuries, but the leaps and bounds we've made in this technology to pave the road to what we know and love today, we must never forget where we started. It allows us to interact. It entertains, it informs. It has saved lives. It has won wars. It has kept people together that would be otherwise oh so far apart. Many may take for granted the impact communication technologies have had on our lives, but I ask you for one thing today. Do not forget. Do not take it for granted. Appreciate. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you had a wonderful Easter.